2 nurses, 2 continents, 2 horrifying secrets. One murdered helpless newborns, and the other preyed on the elderly. Trusted caregivers become cold-blooded killers. And how did no one see it coming? Lucy Letby, by all outward appearances, was the epitome of a caring and professional nurse. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to her work, and nurturing demeanor. Born and raised in Hereford, Lucy was an only child who had always dreamed of becoming a nurse. Her friends described her as gentle, soft-spoken, and compassionate. She was the first in her family to attend university, earning a nursing degree from the University of Chester in 2011. From there, she joined the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital, where she quickly integrated herself into the team and became a beloved member of what she called her little family. But beneath this illusion of normalcy and professionalism lay a sinister truth. But this seemingly dedicated and kind-hearted nurse would become one of the most notorious serial killers in modern British history. Lucy was not just a nurse caring for premature and vulnerable infants. She was also the common denominator in a string of unexplained deaths that would send shockwaves to the hospital, and eventually the entire United Kingdom. It all started in June 2015, when a series of tragic and unexpected deaths began to unfold in the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital. The first to die was a premature baby boy, known in the court records as Child A. Born prematurely and struggling with typical newborn complications, Child A was expected to survive under the hospital's intensive care. But just 90 minutes into Lucy's shift, the baby's condition deteriorated rapidly. His skin turned mottled, his oxygen levels plummeted, and despite desperate efforts by the medical team, Child A died. The cause of death was noted as unascertained. The very next night, another tragedy struck. Child A's twin sister, known as Child B, suddenly suffered a similar decline in health, but miraculously survived. The staff, already reeling from the death of Child A, were perplexed. It was almost too coincidental, but at that time, no one suspected foul play. In the weeks that followed, more babies under her care began to suffer unexplained complications. Another premature baby, Child C, died of acute pneumonia, and shortly after that, Child D succumbed to sepsis. In each case, Lucy was on duty, and in each case, the babies had been stable before suddenly deteriorating. Lucy was often the nurse who would first notice the baby's decline, and she was there when they took their last breaths. She was also the one who would console grieving parents, offer sympathy, and even attend to some of the funerals, always appearing as the compassionate and heartbroken nurse. By the end of 2015, the neonatal unit was shaken by the sheer number of deaths. They began to review the unit's mortality rates, comparing them to previous years. They found that in 2013 and 2014, the unit had seen only 2 or 3 deaths each year. But in 2015, the number had skyrocketed to 8. These were not typical outcomes, even in a unit that cared for critically ill babies. Additionally, one of the senior pediatricians, Dr. Ravi Jairam, began to notice an even more troubling pattern. Lucy was always on duty during these tragic events. At first, doctors dismissed this idea that one of their own could be involved in harming the babies. It was unthinkable, but as more deaths occurred, the pattern became harder to ignore. In early 2016, after the deaths of 2 more infants, known as Child E and Child F, Dr. Jairam and his colleagues could no longer chalk it up to coincidence. Still, the idea that Lucy, the friendly and dedicated nurse, could be responsible for these deaths was too horrific to entertain fully. But Jairam couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. In the spring of 2016, Letby was moved to day shifts, a decision made by the hospital's management in an attempt to see if the pattern of deaths would cease. But it didn't. In June 2016, 2 identical triplet boys, Child O and Child P, died on consecutive days while under Lucy's care. The deaths were too similar to be dismissed as natural causes. The head of the neonatal unit, Dr. Stephen Brary, called for an investigation and requested that Lucy be removed from the unit. However, the hospital's management was hesitant. They were concerned about the potential legal and reputational ramifications. Despite the mounting evidence and the concerns raised by the senior pediatricians, Lucy was allowed to continue working. But the suspicions grew. After yet another death, Dr. Jairam, deeply concerned, conducted a private investigation, reading medical literature and studying the signs of air embolism. In this rare but potentially lethal condition, air bubbles enter the bloodstream. Then, one night, he caught Lucy in the act.
As I walked towards the incubator, I could see on the monitors that the oxygen saturations, which is basically the baby's oxygen levels, were dropping. And they dropped to a level that ordinarily, number one, the alarms would have been going off. But number two, the nurse would have called for help. And Lucy Letby was standing by the top of the incubator. She didn't have her hands in the incubator.
What was she doing then?
Well, she was just standing there.
The symptoms he read about matched what they were seeing in the babies who died under Lucy's care. He and Brary approached the hospital's board with their concerns and suggested calling the police. The board, however, decided to commission an external review instead. Lucy, who had been placed on administrative duties, became increasingly distressed. She told colleagues she felt singled out and didn't understand why she was being blamed. So she filed a complaint against the hospital, which was supported. Under pressure, the hospital's management started questioning the pediatrician's concerns, saying they were jumping to conclusions. Lucy was taken off clinical duties, but remained employed at the hospital. In April 2017, the hospital finally permitted the pediatrician to contact the police. This led to the launch of Operation Hummingbird, a full-scale criminal investigation into the deaths. The police, working closely with medical experts, began to piece together the evidence. Lucy's victims endured unimaginable cruelty. Some had air injected into their veins or stomachs, while others had their stomachs overfilled with milk. Those who survived were poisoned with insulin, leaving them to suffer terribly. Lucy was subsequently arrested in July 2018. After being released on bail, she was rearrested in June 2019 as the inquiry expanded. Finally, on November 11, 2020, she was arrested for a third time and formally charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, marking the point when her actions would be fully revealed. During the search of her home, they found handwritten notes where Lucy had scrawled disturbing statements like, "I am evil. I did this." Although she claimed these were the anguished writings of someone who felt unfairly blamed, the notes were damning. "I don't deserve to live," she writes. "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. I'll never have children or marry. I'll never know what it's like to have a family." Then, in capital letters, she writes, "I'm evil. I did this." Lucy went to trial at Manchester Crown Court, accused of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 10 others in October 2022. Her trial would only conclude 10 months later, in 2023, making it one of the longest and most closely followed in British legal history. The prosecution detailed how Lucy had been the common factor in the deaths of the babies. They described her as a constant, malevolent presence on the neonatal unit, using her position of trust to harm the very children she was supposed to protect. Adding to the disturbing nature of the case, the prosecution revealed that she had searched for the families of several infant victims on Facebook, often on the anniversaries of their babies' deaths and even on Christmas Day. She searched for these families 31 times during the year the deaths occurred, with some searches happening within minutes of each other, which the prosecution likened to hunting for grief. In total, she searched for 11 affected families. Lucy claimed that these searches were out of general curiosity and that she was always on her phone. However, the prosecution highlighted that during that same year, she had conducted 2,287 other searches, further casting doubt on her explanation. The defense argued that she was a scapegoat for hospitals struggling with systemic failures and overworked staff. They suggested that the deaths were tragic but natural, and the result of the baby's extreme vulnerability. Lucy herself took the stand, insisting on her innocence, describing how the accusations had devastated her life. She claimed that the notes found in her home were written out of despair, not confession. But the court was unconvinced. After months of testimony and deliberation, Lucy was found guilty on all charges.
You murdered 7 babies and attempted to murder 6 others. In the case of one of them, trying on separate occasions 2 weeks apart to murder her.
She was sentenced to life in prison, making her only the 4th woman in UK history to be condemned to die behind bars.
Lucy Letby, on each of the 7 offences of murder and the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Because the seriousness of your offences is exceptionally high, I direct that the early release provisions do not apply. The order of the court, therefore, is a whole life order on each and every offence, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
Heather Pressdee's story is not a sudden descent into madness, but a calculated journey marked by years of sinister intent and chilling actions. Her dark path through the healthcare system left a trail of death and despair, which would eventually unravel through a detailed and tragic timeline of her crimes. Heather began her career as a veterinary assistant, a role that involved the regular euthanasia of animals. It was here that she first encountered the power of life and death. The idea that she can control who lived and died took root in her psyche. This experience set the stage for her later atrocities as she transitioned into nursing in 2018. Her stint in the healthcare sector was marked by instability, frequent job changes, complaints of abusive behavior, and a growing list of suspicious patient deaths. By October 2022, Heather had secured employment at Quality Life Services in Butler County, Pennsylvania. It was here that she would begin her most deadly string of attacks. Her method was both chilling and precise. Insulin, a hormone meant to save lives, became her weapon of choice. The first known victim was a 55-year-old man admitted to Quality Life Services. He did not have diabetes and had no need for insulin. Yet on 2 separate occasions in October 2022, his blood sugar dropped to critically low levels. On October 15th, his blood sugar plummeted to 24, barely within survivable range. Medical staff managed to stabilize him temporarily, but less than a month later, on November 20th, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His blood sugar was so low this time that it couldn't even be measured. Despite emergency interventions, his levels barely rose, and he was rushed to the hospital. On December 4th, 2022, he died in the hospital, his body unable to recover from the repeated insulin-induced attacks. Heather was on duty during each of these critical events, responsible for his care and the medication cart. Barely weeks after this first death, Heather struck again. Her second victim, an 83-year-old man with dementia, was a long-term resident of Quality Life Services. On November 19th, just a day before her first victim's final episode, she administered another lethal dose of insulin. By the morning of November 20th, his blood sugar levels had plummeted to 29. Despite multiple attempts by the staff to stabilize him, his condition continued to worsen. He was taken to the hospital, but like her first victim, he never fully recovered. On Christmas Day, December 25th, he, too, died, due to the effects of the insulin overdose. Amid these deaths, a third patient, a 73-year-old man, was also targeted. He, like the others, did not have diabetes and had no reason to receive insulin. On August 31st, he was found seizing in his bed, his blood sugar levels dangerously low. Medical staff intervened in time to save his life, but he was left with severe physical repercussions. The hospital staff noted the suspicious nature of his symptoms, and this case would later play a crucial role in linking Heather to the crimes. As these incidents unfolded, suspicions among the staff began to grow. It wasn't just the sudden and unexplained hypoglycemic episodes, but also the attitude Heather exhibited toward her patients. She was heard making unsettling comments, suggesting that some patients were better off dead. These statements, coupled with her presence during each of these critical incidents, prompted a deeper investigation. The investigation into Heather's activities began in early 2023. The unusual pattern of insulin overdoses, especially among the non-diabetic patients, led the authorities to suspect foul play. The probe was meticulous, focusing on the timelines of her shifts, access to medication, and her interactions with the victims. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a series of text messages Heather had sent to her mother. In these messages, spanning from April 2022 to May 2023, she expressed her frustration with patients and her morbid desire to harm them. She referred to her patients as animals, needing to be put down, a chilling echo of her earlier career as a veterinary assistant. By May 2023, the evidence against Pressdee was overwhelming. She was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who had taken it upon herself to decide the fate of her patients, driven by a twisted sense of control and a disturbing indifference to human life. They highlighted her deliberate choice of insulin, a drug meant to heal, but, in her hands, a tool for murder. The defense had little to offer in her favor, given her confessions and the damning text messages. In May 2024, Heather stood before the court, facing the consequences of her actions. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 19 counts of attempted murder. In exchange for her plea, she avoided the death penalty, but was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms plus an additional 380 to 760 years in prison. During her sentencing, the courtroom was filled with the voices of the victims' families, expressing their grief and anger at a woman who had played God with her loved ones' lives. Heather, however, remained silent. Her admission of guilt already sealed her fate. While the true motive behind her killings may never be known, Heather maintains her actions were a form of mercy, believing that some of her patients were better off dead due to their poor quality of life. Before you go, I'd love to know if you like having multiple stories in one video. Let me know in the comments down below. And if there are any cases you'd like for me to cover, you can email them to me using the address on my channel. Thank you.